I will ask myself, if I work for a company, am I creatively engaged? If I'm really looking at my soul's destiny, and every human being, according to all the great traditions, should be doing that, then if I'm not creatively engaged, I will go elsewhere.
Keep watching to learn more.
Book 3 in the new Thinking Aloud dialogue series is UFOs and UAP, Are We Really Alone? Now available on Amazon.
New Thinking Aloud is presented by the California Institute for Human Science, a fully accredited university offering distant learning graduate degrees that focus on mind, body, and spirit. The topics that we cover here. We are particularly excited to announce new degrees emphasizing parapsychology and the paranormal. Visit their website at cihs.edu. You can now download all 8 copies of the New Thinking Aloud magazine for free, or order beautiful printed copies. Go to newthinkingaloud.org.
Thinking Aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
Hello and welcome. I'm Jeffrey Mishlove. This is part 2 of our 2-part series on the urgencies of the soul in the modern workplace. With me is David Whyte, who is one of America's few full-time poets. David is the author of several books of poetry, including Where Many Rivers Meet and Fire in the Earth, as well as a book of prose and poetry together called The Heart Aroused, Poetry and the Preservation of the Soul in Corporate America. Welcome again, David.
Good. It's good to be here.
It's a pleasure to be with you again. We have been talking about the contrast between the needs of the soul for expression in a kind of full wave, both the heights and the depths, and in contrast to the limitations of the workplace, which require a certain kind of business identity.
Yes. And that very clash of opposites was, or should I say dance of opposites, was exactly what was so difficult about writing the book, actually. In fact, I was asked 3 times to write the book before I said yes, because I knew intuitively how desperately difficult it would be. Because in some ways it mirrors the very split in our own psyche and our own society, that we split off the pragmatic necessities of the everyday from the necessities of the soul, and that our tragedy is we've chosen between them instead of living out our life between them. As human beings, we don't have any choice between the practicalities and our longings, our desires, and our soul life. We always have to live our life out between those two fires. And there's a vast body of traditional story and poetry and song which speaks to that. And my work is to take the poetic tradition back into the mainstream, and particularly at the moment through force of circumstance into the corporate world, where I do much of my work as a poet.
And it's there in the corporate world that you use poetry as a way, in effect, to reawaken people to their own depths. We often hide from ourselves as we get locked into kind of the practicalities of life.
Both individuals and corporations are wanting to wake up now and be more alive, more attentive. And they find that all the old promises they made to each other are actually ways of blindfolding both the individual and the corporation. And so now both are looking for a more of a peer relationship, both the person who works for the corporation and the corporate body itself. We're trying to get out of the father-son, mother-child relationship and into a more of a peer relationship in the workplace. That way you've got much more possibility for teams, much more possibility for creative engagement. And I'm not always mistaking you as my father, you see, when you're my boss. And you're not mistaking me as your son. We have a possibility of a real peer relationship.
Well, there's a sense in the corporate world that people are appraised according to their rank within the corporation and their position. And yet, whether you're young or old or experienced or inexperienced, each person brings the fullness of their own spirit. And poetry, in a way, has the possibility of getting people to connect at that deeper level that transcends position.
Yes. It's not that everybody is going to be all on the same level, because there is a hierarchy of function and experience, which is natural. Mm-hmm. If you've been working with this for 15 years, there are certain gifts you bring to it which I don't have. At the same time, I have new eyes to see things that you have long ago become inured to. Yeah. And so there is a kind of teamwork that can occur there. But the old forms of hierarchy, right down to the parking places, and the corner office, and the levels in the hierarchy, the senior, assistant, junior, vice president, and were basically they're payoffs, for people who have put in their time.
Sure.
And companies are realizing how expensive that is. But you see, if you take that away, you have to give something else. You have to give some kind of real creative engagement, and that will be the touchstone of the new workplace. I will ask myself, if I work for a company, am I creatively engaged? If I'm really looking at my soul's destiny, and every human being, according to all the great traditions, should be doing that, then if I'm not creatively engaged, I will go elsewhere. And in fact, I think a very healthy workplace is where everyone feels that at any moment, any one of those people could go off and set up in opposition. Do you know what I mean?
Well,
then you really know you're working with peers, and you really know you have the right people working with you.
Of course, most people would feel that they're constrained. They can't just go. They'd lose their health plan, or their mortgage payments would fall behind.
That's right. And this is where the idea in poetry of remembering what is most important in your life, and that when you do encumber yourself, you encumber your soul's destiny in the world, and therefore to live as lightly as possible allows you that freedom of movement too. But even for the person, who is weighed down with car payments, mortgage, dependence, the whole thing, there is still somewhere at the center of that life, even a tiny step of movement towards their own life. Yeah. And the great tradition says even that tiny step is enough. There's a marvelous poem by Mary Oliver, one of our great contemporary poets right now. A poem called The Journey, where she says, one day you finally knew what you had to do. One day you finally knew what you had to do and began, though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice, though the whole house began to tremble and you felt the old tug at your ankles. Mend my life, each voice cried, mend my life, but you didn't stop. You knew what you had to do, though the wind pried with its stiff fingers at the very foundations, though their melancholy was terrible. It was already late enough. It was already late enough. It was already late enough, and a wild night, and the road full of fallen branches and stones. But little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds, and there was a new voice, which you slowly recognized as your own, that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save.
It is very powerful.
Yes.
It is very powerful.
Yes. And you see these last lines, if you just hear these last lines in isolation, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save, then the strategic part of the mind will come in as a kind of defense, say, well, that's just 70s me generation all over again. But actually, she precedes those two lines with this other line, which says, striding deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save. You see, there's that contact where she has come to the understanding that all the great contemplatives and mystics came to, that there actually is no discrete individual human being, that you only understand your pattern what you might call your destiny, your way in the world by meeting, and that everything is found in meeting. And it's where two actual pieces of the world meet that you get this third thing which is alive. Certainly all biologists know this. It's where the water and the air and the land meet that you get most life. Mm-hmm. And it's where we meet other people that you get most life. Or as individuals where we meet another medium, say we meet silence in the inner. And it's at that surface area that things come alive. So you say, what kind of workplace can you create where there's some kind of meeting and people are feeling that meeting on a daily basis with something much larger than themselves?
The poem also seemed to suggest the sense of isolation, that when you strike out on a new creative
at the beginning,
course.
Yeah. Joseph Campbell said, if you can see the path laid out ahead of you step by step, then you know it's not your path. It's someone else's path you mistook for your own. Yeah. And that is what Mary Oliver is speaking to, you see. She says, you want to know what it's like to really set out on your life's endeavor? It feels like you're leaving your house at 2 o'clock in the morning in a windstorm. It was already late enough and a wild night and the road full of fallen branches and stones. But little by little, as you left their voices behind, she goes on.
There's this incredible paradox in all of this. It's as if here we are, it's the now moment where we are someplace where humanity has never been before. We are confronting new challenges. We're stepping into the unknown, and it's frightening. And yet, throughout history, although they have never been here, the poets have touched some kind of eternal verities that are very relevant to where we are now.
Yes. And I don't think there's anything new happening right now. It's just that it's happening on a much broader scale. There are many more human beings working with these issues now than there were in the past. For instance, most epochs of human existence, we could be killed for talking about these issues in public, you see. They were only to be spoken about by initiates or people who were actually within a certain kind of training. Mm-hmm. And now it's as if it's out. It's out in general society, you see. It's out in the world and it's in the air itself. Mm-hmm. You go into the most hidebound corporation and people there are incredibly responsive to this work around creativity and the soul. They both see the practical need for it in the workplace, about how expensive it is not to have that kind of creativity. Mm-hmm. And they touch into their own tremendous longings, which may have been pushed away a long time. I worked with managers at AT&T. There was a wonderful woman there who's also a marvelous poet. And she wrote these devastating lines. She said, 10 years ago, I turned my face for a moment, and it became my life. 10 years ago, I turned my face for a moment, just for a moment, like that. Perhaps not even that far, just that. And it became my life. You see, we say, I'll just go over here and do this, and then I'll get back to what I really care about.
Yes.
I'll just go over here and, as an artist, the artist say, I'll just go over here and work in advertising, and then I'll come over and do I'll just go, and then...
Just wait until the kids are through school or something.
Yes, that's right, this postponing. Mm-hmm. That slowly tears at the fabric of your existence. And what I've come to is that ignoring your creative urgencies is not a passive process. It's not as if things are on hold. They're actually it's a corrosive experience. I had this poem I wrote about being out in a storm in a kayak in the middle of, out of sight of land. And the last lines came through. They were almost like a blow to my solar plexus. It was, always this energy smolders inside. Always, this was the vitality I felt in the middle of those waves when I was sure I was going to drown. And I started paddling and following those waves in this frail kayak. And somehow I held my balance through miles of water to the shore in mountainous seas. But the lines were always this energy smolders inside. When it remains unlit, the body fills with dense smoke. Always this energy smolders inside. When it remains unlit, the body fills with dense smoke. It's almost as if the fire is always there. Always there. But if you starve it of oxygen, you fill up with this particulate matter. Mm-hmm. And usually that particulate matter is quite toxic. It has to do with self-hate, blame, the feeling of something always missing from your life. Always missing. Not quite there. Mm-hmm. Now, take that theme, for instance, of something always missing. Now, there's two sides to that. And you can work with this in the workplace because people are always feeling you can do better. And the Greeks understood this. They called it eros, you see. Eros was the ability to know what was missing in your life and to follow it.
Really?
Yes.
And that's where we get the word erotic.
Yes, that's right. It was the longing in your life.
Mm.
And we've narrowed it down to the sexual area. Yes.
That's all we've inherited out of all of this, this incredible yearning for our own inner greatness.
That's right. That's right. And for a meeting. You know, sexuality is emblematic of meeting. And it's almost as if all our eggs are in that basket now. Mm-hmm. Well, I say if that's the only basket you have, then that's where the soul will work out its life through sexuality. But there is a broader sexual experience, sexual meeting with all aspects of human artistry and intimacy, which are there all the time. And it's a much broader front we can work on. It has to do with physical presence, has to do with alertness, it has to do with vitality, it has to do with finding your own gifts and finding your place in the world.
You're suggesting we can bring eros back into the world of business, into the corporate world.
Yes, and I'm suggesting it's great for the soul and it's good for business too. Mm-hmm. That actually the companies that don't have eros will be staggering around and limping.
Well, I gather that advertisers have understood this for a long time, but you're speaking of it in a deeper way.
Yes, unfortunately in a shadow way. Yeah. You know, and advertisers will use emblems that are sacred to human experience and then get you to buy,
deodorant.
Yes, that's right, a deodorant. And there's something wrong with that. There is something wrong with that, you have to say. That is a misapplication of the artistic urgencies, but the actual desire itself that people have, that they're pulling on, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with those desires. Much of what poetry works with is the rehabilitation of desire, because I feel that both the Eastern and Western mainstream religious traditions have got something terribly wrong around desire. And I think it's just as true in the East as in the West, that you hope you can get to this desireless place where you will not be bothered by your inner longings, and therefore you will be safe, you see.
Yes.
It's like an exchange for immunity.
Right. Suffering comes from desire, but you're saying, I think, that we need to even embrace suffering.
What I'm saying, yes. Oh, yeah. What I'm saying is that I don't believe that human beings can live without desire. That if a human being tries to give away their desires, then almost always they will put themselves in the thrall of someone who has kept their desires alive.
It's as if people renounce their desires in order to find their soul, but in so doing they renounce their soul itself.
They renounce their desires in order to be safe. Mm-hmm. They hope that, you see, they've been burnt at the edges by their own desires. Mm-hmm. And so the hope is, they haven't heard Yevtushenko, you see, say, sorrow happens, hardship happens, the hell with it. Who never knew the price of happiness will not be happy. Sorrow happens, hardship happens, the hell with it. Who never knew the price of happiness will not be happy. Mm-hmm. It's this, the poetic traditions say, stop trying to arrange your life so that you do not get hurt. There is no way you can do that. It's part of existence.
Now, when you say the poetic tradition, it seems to me that poetry is such a vast universe. I mean, one can find, cannot one find poetic traditions that are sort of sugar-coated, that don't?
Yes, you can, and that's not the poetic tradition I'm talking about. Yeah. I'm talking about a core tradition that is there from generation to generation. And that lasts from generation to generation. The sugar-coated tradition, poetry doesn't last from one generation to another. It usually just appeals to the taste of that particular generation, whether it was Victorian sugar-coated Georgian poetry, or whether it was, whether it was the 60s kind of love poetry, or New Age poetry, which mentions love and the universe and stars far too many times. They're all surface phenomena. But the true poetic tradition, which you find in all cultures, is people at their edge of their own speech, trying to overhear themselves say things they did not know they knew. Yeah. and in some ways frightening themselves with it. Mm-hmm. Because some of the truths you do not want to know. They are too, at certain stages they can be too disturbing to your psyche. Mm-hmm. You need more time to grow into them. Yeah. But often when you're writing poetry, you'll actually stumble into these.
Yes.
And they can be tremendous, into these lines, they can be tremendous shocks to the system.
Well, if you look at this deep tradition, you have sensitive human spirits now, thousands of years in many different cultures, having experienced almost every nuance of the human condition and,
That's right.
and written about it.
Yeah.
And now you can draw on that. If you come into a corporation and see people struggling with a particular issue, you can say, well, that's not so different from a problem that was experienced in ancient Greece or in China.
Well, exactly. For instance, I was working with a very large company recently, and they had created a team in order to institute these new changes they want. But this team were getting all kinds of marvelous double messages. They were empowered, as the current language goes, to go off and create something to really change the whole company. This is an enormous multi-billion-dollar company. And at the same time, whenever they really had conversations with people in the hierarchy, people's eyes were going like this. And I sat down with this team because they wanted to bring me in. And I said, well, you know what the phenomena this is? And they said, what? They said, from an anthropologist, never mind a poet's point of view, but from another tradition, the anthropologist's point of view, you are a blood sacrifice. And that often cultures will change by actually sacrificing parts of themselves.
Yes.
And they will actually kill the messenger. And when the messenger is dead, then they will change. Mm. But they will not change while the messenger is actually telling them. And so you have to know that this is going on. Partly because your own careers are on the line too. But also you just have to know what's going on so that you don't get angry at these people for seeming to betray you. You are part of a much larger phenomenon, and unless you can talk about it in those terms, and in some ways you need poetic diction to be able to talk about those things, then you're going to be living out these, as Joseph Campbell said, if you do not understand the myth will live you out anyway. Mm-hmm. So,
well, the myth and the poem are able to express the paradoxes of existence, the ironies of existence, where it seems as if the logical corporate mind, the Apollonian consciousness, as you've called it in the light of day, isn't very good at handling irony and paradox.
No, that likes to tidy up. There's a street, sometime in our spiritual evolution, there's been a palace coup. Mm-hmm. And that part of the mind, which was meant to allow us to survive from day to day and get the children off to school and make sure there's enough food in the camp or whatever stage of human history you're talking about, became so frightened that it took over the central experiential part of a human being, which we sacred part, timeless part, which we have called the soul. And so we have what in effect is a kind of internal Richard III, sitting on a throne he does not belong, you see, which is the strategic mind, and its wish to tidy everything up, and to have an ending and a beginning for everything, and to have it quite linear, and to have everything safe, you see. And so the soul actually becomes perceived as the enemy. And at times in history it has been called the devil. The soul has actually been mistaken for the devil because its urgencies and its desires never seem to go away. And if you do not answer them, then you cause all kinds of tremendous imbalances inside your body.
It's always sort of rocking the boat.
You see, one thing I work with, if I get to a certain depth with people working in corporations, is that you have to understand things about the soul. That it's not this Pollyannish, lovely kind of angelic interior energy. It has its pattern to live out in the world, and it will do that what may, in whatever form you give it. And if you give it just a narrow, constricted form, all that energy will come out in one area. And the soul will actually kill in order to live its destiny, if that is the only way it can do it. And so you had better get out of its way, and you better give it a place to live in your life. Because it's going to live out some form of its pattern anyway. And you see tragedy after tragedy of people bottling this energy inside. And then one day, bang,
You know, we mentioned in introducing you, David, that you're one of the few full-time poets in the United States. It's not a career that people easily pursue.
No, that's right. When you tell people that you're going to leave your full-time position and go as a full-time poet, then it gets very silent in the room. Mm-hmm. People don't rush up, slap you on the back and say, I hear there's a great dental plan there with the poetry.
It's not so different, I suppose, from being a prophet.
Well, you let other people say if you're being prophetic. You know, you don't want to say you're a prophet yourself. But poetry has always been looking over the horizon. The poets, as Gary Snyder said, tend to be 50 to 100 years ahead of their time in the qualities they're working with.
Yes,
not necessarily describing technology, but the qualities of human experience, for instance.
Well, why I use the analogy of the prophets is more the sense of trying to awaken the people to say, you better get in touch with something inside of yourself or terrible events will befall you. I don't know that prophets were so much foretelling the future as trying to awaken an innerness, and often the prophets were resisted.
Well, you know, the worst terrible event that the poet talks about is the life unlived, that you can actually live someone else's life, and that is the ultimate tragedy. There's a line by Rilke, it's the ultimate condemnation, where he's walking past one of these absinthe bars in late 19th century Paris, where the people who lived out terrible lives in the workplace there tried to reconstitute a little bit of soul through the drink, the green fairy as they called it. Van Gogh was addicted to it too. But he looks through and he sees these people speaking to one another through the windows, and he can't hear them, he just sees the gesticulations, and he says, they say I, and they mean anybody. They say I, and they mean anybody. They could mean anybody when they say I. That is the ultimate loss, you see, that you could say I, and you could actually mean anyone. Instead of this rich human soul, it's been 15 billion years of evolution, and only you can fail in the way you can fail, in the workplace or out of the workplace. And you are quibbling. That's what the universe is saying to us. You are worried about failing, and there is no other part of the universe that can fail in the way you can fail. And why wouldn't you think that would be magnificent? To fail only in the way you can fail. That no one else in the whole world could fail, could mess up in the way you could mess up. And therefore, why don't you have courage to do that?
It's as if the poetry is pushing us in two directions, to be fully ourselves and at the same time to transcend ourselves and to connect with the, as you've put it, the soul of nature around us.
To transcend ourselves, but it's also to understand the underbelly of existence, the dark side. Here's a...
Well, we're out of time. We are out of time.
The poet is always out of time. He never gets enough time to speak, but that's wonderful. It's been a good conversation.
It's been a great conversation, David Whyte.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with me.
Bye now.
And thank you for being with us.
Book 3 in the new Thinking Aloud dialogue series is UFOs and UAP, Are We Really Alone? Now available on Amazon.
New Thinking Aloud is presented by the California Institute for Human Science, a fully accredited university offering distant learning graduate degrees that focus on mind, body, and spirit. The topics that we cover here. We are particularly excited to announce new degrees emphasizing parapsychology and the paranormal. Visit their website at cihs.edu. You can now download all 8 copies of the New Thinking Aloud magazine for free, or order beautiful printed copies. Go to newthinkingaloud.org.